Hello, everyone. It's Friday again, and that means it's time to deploy. My name's John Bristow. I'm the community director here at Octopus Deploy, and I'd like to thank you for your time and attention for joining us today. Normally, I'd be doing this with Jim Pelletier, but he is again away on leave. Of course, we're all jealous, but I hope he's having a nice time. This is the show that brings you the latest tech trends and news that we talk about here on a weekly basis as it relates to Octopus Deploy. And so, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So things have been busy relative to Octopus. We've been working on a lot of key features recently, and I've been really, really happy with the progress we've been making relative to a lot of the things we have on our roadmap. Just to reiterate, our roadmap's available at /roadmap. We've got lots of things that are planned there. You can go check those out if you so wish, vote them up and down, etc. And I'm really excited about what's coming down the pipe. We've got some really key features that I think a lot of people are going to be really happy with. Of course, we've also shipped a lot of stuff as well. As you can tell by the list, we've been pretty busy as of late. But with that, let's go ahead and talk about some of the industry news relevant to Octopus and some of the things that we would like to touch on here. So Homebrew is a package manager for Mac. It's really, really popular because of its simplicity. Some would argue that it probably has grown very quickly and as a result doesn't have the best sort of feature set relative to things like relative to security, etc., setting up, various packages available up on GitHub, etc. But that being said, Homebrew is the sort of canonical way in which most people will install software on a Mac. And so Homebrew 4.1 has just shipped. So 4.1 is an evolution of 4, which added some major changes to the application itself. But just to iterate through some of the things that are mentioned here. So Brew downloads of Formula/Cask APIs use a signed API endpoint with client signature validation. That's very important. Obviously, you want to make sure that the binaries that you're pulling down can be validated based on the signatures that are propagated there. So that is oftentimes touted as something that is one of the sort of things around Homebrew that could be improved is the security element of it. So I'm very pleased to see that 4.1 now introduces that. We've also made many improvements around the new 4.0 feature using JSON files downloaded from formulae.brew.sh for package installation rather than local homebrew/core and homebrew/cask taps. This is great because obviously, when pulling down from a well-known location, you can actually secure those locations and make them validated based on the endpoint that they're coming from, which is great. Brew Doctor is a capability of the CLI that is really popular. It allows you to see whether or not certain features are enabled or disabled. Need to be fixed, etc. So they're now providing a warning for anything that is tapped unnecessarily. So you can untap, which is always a challenge, obviously, when looking at some of these things. You can pull down a lot of binaries and you can end up with a pretty littered hard disk, which is great. Lots of other things there, which are mentioned. 4.1 obviously being available today. I haven't had a chance to look at this yet, but just reading through some of the features there, that's awesome. Incidentally, we do ship a lot of our tools via Homebrew. So you can download the CLI, for example. You can download other things as well via Brew itself. And so that's why I thought this would be bearing mention for Deploy on Friday. Supercharge productivity with generative AI and GitLab Duo. So GitLab is very popular location for a lot of folks to host their source code. Very popular CI tool for source control and iterating or executing workflows on source control. And so GitLab has basically been touting a lot of its generative AI capabilities, and they have a Copilot-like feature called Duo. This is obviously in competition with GitHub. And so in this article, they talk a little bit about how they're providing this capability through a variety of means, specifically around things like code suggestions. They have an integration with VS Code now. They also provide things like explanations, doc generation, etc., test generation, explanations around vulnerabilities. And these and other capabilities are obviously core to a lot of the things that are being done around what is available now through GitLab. So GitLab is definitely espousing the use of this, and they until recently, like in I think it was GitLab 16, they talked a great deal about promoting AI and making DevSecOps, that is security across your DevOps process, a core aspect. So they talk a lot about the values in here. Of course, they talk about DORA metrics, which is something that very near and dear to our heart at Octopus. Improved code review processes as well. So when doing merging of pull requests, for example, or change requests, you can see a nice summary of that. Any comments that you are working on relative to changes, etc., or bugs, etc., they can summarize those now, which is awesome. And then they can do other capabilities as well. So these and other capabilities are basically annotating the facilities that are provided through GitLab through its interface, and this is all driven via its AI. And the other thing that GitLab espouses quite heavily is that the AI, the large language model itself, I believe, is not shared, which is, if I recall correctly, is a little bit different to the way in which GitHub Copilot works, which is based on the public source code that is available. So that is a bit of a difference there in terms of that. But I thought this article was kind of cool, and so we have a lot of customers who use GitLab, and so I thought I'd mention it there. Speaking of GitHub now, metrics for issues, pull requests, and discussions. So there is a new GitHub action around Git issue metrics. So you can now track and monitor important metrics related to issues, pull requests, and discussions, which is great. So in this article, they talk a little bit about this. They provide the motivation around having data to basically drive a lot of decision making. But here's an example of what this might look like in the case of issue metrics. So things that are providing some metrics around things like time to first response, time to close, etc. You can kind of think of this as kind of like DORA metrics, but for issues. So these and other things you can now get reporting on via this new GitHub action that's available for GitHub users. So it will give you these analytics as part of this, and you can kick this off as part of an event if you wish. So some of the common use cases that I talk about this, so making sure that issues get their proper attention, so you don't have long-standing issues that remain around for a long period of time. I know that certainly if I started using this, my issue times for responses would be very, very inflated. First responders, a timely first user contact, which is great. Open source program office, streamlining open source requests. So that's another aspect there that will tie into the issue metrics GitHub action. Product team or product development teams optimizing pull request reviews. Again, another metrics that tie into that. The way that you'll work this in is via the GitHub action that's propagated here. So this is a YAML file that describes this. They're keying this off in two events. One, which is manual. Workflow dispatch basically means I'm going to click a button and I want to execute that workflow manually. And then the other one is here, it's based on a schedule. So this is using a cron description for this. And so on a periodic basis, I'm assuming monthly, these metrics will be generated. And it's done so utilizing the metrics report GitHub action, which is here. So if you utilize this action here, this will generate that. And then you can propagate that in an issue directly as a subsequent step as part of this job. So here we generate the metrics, and then we follow that up by propagating those metrics into a report, and we're just propagating that to a markdown file. So this is one way you can do it. You can use it as many ways as you wish. Again, it's because it's based on events. You can now see those values. But if you're at all interested, you can go check that out. It's available up on the marketplace. And this is what it looks like in its full glory, I guess. So you can see we have a generated table structure here, and we'll be able to utilize that within line of our issues, which is fantastic. So great stuff. Our folks over at JetBrains are obviously busy. They have so many updates. Like, it's crazy. I subscribe to their blog, and they're always propagating updates in terms of all their product line. And it helps when you have a lot of products. Like, JetBrains ships a lot of different pieces of software. They have TeamCity. They have all their IDE products. They have IDEs for C# and Go and Java, and they have Kotlin as their language, and they have a lot of different things, and so they're always propagating updates. So ReSharper and Rider bug fix releases here. So ReSharper is a very popular tool used for static code analysis and refactoring of C# code. Rider is their C# IDE, sort of like a competitor to Visual Studio Code, etc. And so they've recently shipped 2023.1.4. And these are bug fix updates for this. So I know a lot of folks at Octopus utilize these tools, and so I'm sure that they may have encountered one of these problems associated with these bug fixes. But if you're at all curious about reading what's new, you can go check out their blog, and this is something that just dropped recently. So good stuff from them. Switching over to Microsoft, introducing a powerful new extension manager. So the extension manager in Visual Studio and also Visual Studio Code, there is an extension manager there, is probably the secret sauce of making that tool as popular as it is. Extensions are the way in which by which we increase or expand the capabilities of our integrated code environments. And the extension manager for a long time, I think in Visual Studio for a long time wasn't ideal. Like you'd get a very loose description of what the extension was that you were downloading. Maybe you get an update or two once in a while, but the extensions, that the way they were propagated wasn't in a very expandable window. The descriptions themselves were rather light. It was limited to very limited descriptions of output, etc. And so now what you can do with the new extension manager that's available is get actually a lot more integrated details about the extensions you use. So by way of an example here, this is obviously a GIF here, but you can see we've got now integrated screenshots. You can see a detailed description based on Markdown. Obviously, this borrows from a lot of the capabilities of VS Code. So I think what they've done here is they've consolidated the extension manager that's very popular in VS Code and now brought it to Visual Studio proper, which is awesome. So Visual Studio, I think, for a long time has needed something better around this space. And so this is the new extension manager that they're adding. This is available in Visual Studio 17.7 Preview 3. And once you install it there, you'll be able to enable it under the Preview Features section of settings. It does require a restart, but once it's installed, you'll see this new rich extension manager available for you. Of course, all the stuff that you would come to know and love around extensions, like discovering new extensions, installing them, updating them, etc., are there. They will show you all the metadata associated with that, like the number of times it's been installed, so you'll be able to rank these and sort them. These are things that you could do in the old extension manager, but it was, as I said before, it was a bit light in its description. So this is now available in 17.7 Preview 3, and so you can go check that out today, which is great. Moving on, switching back to JetBrains, introducing terminal agents, agent terminals rather, in TeamCity. So TeamCity is JetBrains CI, or continuous integration server. It's great. We utilize it a lot at Octopus. And one of the capabilities that they have recently enabled is things called agent terminals. So agents are the sort of workhorses of TeamCity. They are the things that execute code. They're kind of canonical to workers in Octopus in the sense that agents are really the things that are doing the builds. So they're running unit tests, they're executing compilation steps, etc. And so oftentimes when you run these agents, they communicate back with TeamCity, but being able to connect remotely to those agents was always a challenge. And so a new feature in TeamCity, I believe we've talked about this in the past, is a new facility called agent terminals. So what agent terminals allow you to do is basically remotely connect to machines that are on these remote agents and view things like system logs, update software, debug specific issues that are on the agent itself. And that's all within the TeamCity UI itself. So by way of example, you can see here a typical scenario where I've executed a job. Let's say I've got a agent set up on a Linux instance. It's a small CPU instance, small memory, whatever. And now what they've done is they've surfaced out this open terminal command within the UI itself. So when you click on that, it will provide a shell that will allow you, in line within TeamCity, to actually perform commands. And so as by way of example, they click on that button here, and you can see you get an open instance here to PowerShell, and you can execute commands via PowerShell. You can install software, you can check logs, etc. So this is really nice, and this is all within the context of the browser. So no need to do remote terminals. I mean, you could. I mean, that's probably the ideal way of doing this is via SSH, etc. But now you have the ability of doing this within inline of the TeamCity UI itself, which is fantastic. And so this is a new capability that they've just recently updated and added to TeamCity. And you'll see this in the agents that are running your jobs in line with TeamCity, which is great. I'm a huge fan of this, and I think it's fantastic. So, like they point out here, instead of starting up a SSH session, which is per agent, you can easily stream those directly through to the terminal and be able to propagate those changes as needed. So that's new in TeamCity, agent terminals in TeamCity, which is fantastic. Just checking the version here. I believe they mentioned it here at the top. Yeah, starting in 2023.05. TeamCity will provide a convenient and quick way to get direct access to an agent machine by operating a remote terminal directly from within the TeamCity UI. So there you go. Fantastic. Back to GitHub again. So GitHub Actions, as I mentioned before, is actually based off of an environment that is provided through a series of runners. Runners are sort of like the agents of GitHub. And so they typically come pre-installed with software. So you'll see things like the .NET environment, the Go compilation tools, and other environments like Node. And so for a very long time, Node 12, I believe Node 10 and Node 12 were the runtime environments that were pre-installed on runners. And this has been a notice that has been propagated through GitHub for a while now, which is Node 12, the runtime environment, is going to be removed from the Actions runner by default, starting very, very soon. I believe it's, yes, listed here as August 14th, 2023. So August 14th, 2023, Node 12 will no longer be available on the Actions runner, which is very important for folks who rely upon or assume Node 12 for their agent runtime. So just be aware of that. If you've been running agents, you may have noticed this as a warning in your running of Actions. So if you haven't noticed this yet, I would suggest you go take a look at your agent logs, and you'll see the warnings there. And so this has been out of support since April 2022, but they're going to now remove it. It's been deprecated, but this is now, they're going to cut it off starting in August 14th. And they're encouraging everyone to move to Node 16 rather. So Node 16 is the new default runtime available for runners. And in order to get these things updated, this is available in your YAML file when you're defining your configuration values. So you'll define here the runtime environment. This is in the YAML for your workflows. This is how you propagate or denote the type of runtime environment you want to run. So you want to make sure you're utilizing Node 16 going forward as part of that change. Another post from GitHub, the release radar. This is something that they do periodically where they talk a lot about some of the things that have been shipped as part of open source projects available up on GitHub, which is fantastic. And this is their spring edition version. This was something that they really got into the habit of doing, but they, as they say here, conferences, getting the flu, struck down by weather, etc. We haven't done it for a while, but now we're getting back into it. So there's a lot of products that are mentioned here that are worth mentioning. So QuestDB as an example, Kyoto, which is a new version of, well, it's the 1.0. Not many people know about Microsoft Kyoto. Microsoft Kyoto was sort of an answer to the Open API tool set that was available there. So if you're doing anything with APIs, and with specifically Open API, you might want to check this out. So Kyoto's been under development for quite a while now, and I would see it as a competitor to a lot of the Open API tool sets that are available today. It's basically Microsoft's version of this. It utilizes Roslyn, I believe, as part of this. And what it does is it will not only generate client libraries, but also, I believe, server-side libraries stubs for server-side based on your Open API description. So if you're utilizing an Open API 3.0 description via JSON to describe your endpoints, this will generate now the API client libraries in Go, Java, TypeScript, PHP, C#, etc. As part of that environment. So they've reached 1.0, which is fantastic. And I think it's wonderful to see that this is coming to fruition. I've actually looked at this a number of times. This is their repo available up on GitHub, excuse me. And I believe I'm pronouncing it right. I believe it's Kyoto. But the folks working on this, a number of folks at Microsoft have been working on this, and they talk a little bit about how they are supporting various languages. So they can generate a variety of client libraries based on your API description, as well as the serialization routines for serializing and deserializing those JSON messages to and from your API. So definitely worth checking out. Definitely considered, I believe, a strong competitor to the Open API tool set that are available today. And this is based on, as I say here, their API library that they have for Open API. So if you're doing anything with APIs, specifically Open API, definitely something to check out. And 1.0 is now available, which is great. JSON Crack 3. JSON Crack is available here up on GitHub. And basically, if you want to visualize your JSON, your YAML, any type of sort of description language, including XML, etc. This will allow you to visualize that utilizing this tool. So this is available at jasoncrack.com. It's available up on GitHub as well, and it'll allow you to basically traverse your tree structure and visualize it accordingly, which is great. Tools like this are wonderful. Like, I'm a huge fan of tools like this, like Mermaid, for example, which is another tool for visualizing in the case of Markdown, which is for graphs and charts, etc. This is a wonderful tool for visualizing the tree structure of JSON documents, which is great, along with other documents as well. Yache AI, Chat Analytics, Yamed, and others. Nuke, great tool for building source. So this is basically a great build tool. We've utilized this in the past. Cake is another example of a build tool you can use. Nuke 7 is now available, so you can check that out. I believe this has their own website as well. Yep, nuke.build. So if you're looking to utilize that, it gives you some great capabilities for that as well. Vine.js, this is another, if you're utilizing Node, another great tool set for utilizing that. Ionic framework, obviously, if you're building out UIs with Ionic, version 7 is now available. So you can see there's just lots and lots of stuff here in the release radar. And so all these are mentioned in their latest release up on GitHub, which is fantastic. And then finally, wrapping things up with GitHub, this is their Copilot update for July 14th. So Copilot continues to iterate. It's not just ChatGPT in terms of APIs. There's lots of stuff that you can do with AI, and Copilot is an example of this. So automate GitHub Copilot access for organization with user management API. So this is they often supplement GitHub. That is, they often supplement their services with a bunch of other APIs as well, which are super useful. So user management, for example, and because API first is the sort of driven metric here for a lot of this stuff. This is really useful if you're wanting to make this available to your users as part of this. Numerous create commands in Visual Studio Code 1.8 or 80, depending on your definition. So you can do /create workspace for Copilot if you want to through the / command. You can create notebooks, etc., through the /create notebook command as well. These / commands are available via the Copilot instance dialog. If you haven't run Copilot before, it basically gives you this text box when you install it as part of the Visual Studio extension. And then you can basically type queries in there. And so they have / commands in there, much like you have / commands in most other tools like Slack and GitHub, etc. This is an example of that. So you can create notebooks. And there are a variety of other / commands as well worth noting. Some other extension improvements they've added, better support for programming languages. That means basically bug fixes for a lot of different languages. Save and restore chat history. That's a huge one because obviously it's this sort of like running a terminal window. If you forget your history, you forget the commands, you're like, oh, what was it again? And going back through your history also helps. Multi-line prompt box, that's huge. Being able to prompt through command line feeds, etc. It's great. Streaming support for the window itself, insertions for test generation, and quality of life updates. So these and other capabilities are now added to the VS extension relative to Copilot. And they go into some of the other details of things that they've done as well relative to Copilot. So those and other updates are now available as part of the Copilot updates for GitHub Copilot, which is fantastic. So there you go. That wraps up another edition of Deploy on Friday. I hope you enjoyed it. Those are some of the news and updates relative to Octopus Deploy that we saw during the week. And if you happen to stumble upon something that you would like us to chat about, feel free to send us a message, and we'd be happy to talk about it. But until then, hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time here next week on Deploy on Friday.